good, I don't know if it's good morning or good evening or good something, but it's been a while since I last recorded, and I thought it's important that I do this video because in the past 2 weeks past 3 weeks, I've been involved in a recruitment processes for different categories of posts, and it's been a while since I've been involved in these processes, especially sitting on the other side of the table during the interview process. But one of the things that I've been trying to emphasize to people, we were still gonna talk about the CV. I think a lot of people don't understand the importance of a CV today in our profession. It never used to be a thing, but today it is. It's very important. It makes a statement, and your CV, as I've said, and other people have said this as well, that it gets your foot into the door. So it is a very, very, very critical element of the recruitment process. So for a job hunter, make sure your CV is represents you, basically. I know we take CVs to professionals who edit it and do all of these funny things, and a lot of the times they do that because a lot of institutions and organizations and companies, they use recruitment agencies which use AI technology to sift through the CVs, especially if it's a lot. Some are automatically disqualified. But occasionally an error happens, as with one incident that I encountered, where a person so there was one post, right? One type of post, but for 3 different departments. So the person had tried to apply in 2 of the departments because it was an internal advertisement. So the system kicked them out. They didn't accept their application for the 2 other departments. And then the third department accepted. And remember, I'm saying to you that this is a one type of post. They're exactly the same in every aspect: requirements, job spec, KPIs, all of that. So I don't know how the one accepted and then the 2 others didn't. But they were later disqualified, but after the interview process, because we conducted the interview, we raised a concern about something, but because we were already there and the candidate had performed relatively well, So we said, look, let's do our part as the panel, and then the verifications and other things, which is admin, can be done after. And then if so, we'll provisionally recommend her pending the verification. But if the verification fails, then they'll be disqualified, and that's what happened. So I'm saying the CV does play a role, because it did get a foot in the door, but unfortunately, yeah. So, but what I wanted to say is the overall conduct and some behavioral I don't know how to put them, but the some things that people display, the body language, during interview process. People take it lightly that an interview process is where you market yourself, it's where you sell yourself. CV gets you only so far, but then a decision has to be made during the interview process. I'm going to tell you that, and that's why I wanted to wait until I was done with these processes, because I didn't want to make comments whilst I was still in the middle of this thing. And I'm glad I did, because there were a couple of things that happened which I felt I wish more people knew about, not to do, things not to do during an interview. Some harder than others, right? And people I've spoken to who would have asked maybe for tips on interview, how to approach certain questions, I always tell them that first question they ask, tell us about yourself. That question sets the tone of the interview. And a lot of times that question, if you get it wrong, remember it's an unscoring question, but if there are things that you do there and that send alarm bells ringing into the heads of the panel, you are not likely to have a good interview. And I say this because not all interview processes have what we call an answer sheet, where there are certain phrases or keywords or expressions that you need to mention when you respond to a certain question. Some questions, for instance, the interviews that we did, we were looking for a certain way of responding. We were assessing your reasoning, basically, and your thinking, right? But we don't have, it's open-ended questions. We're not saying you must say this and that and this and that, but your reasoning must align with a certain way of thinking. And there are things we expect you to touch on in certain questions. So that type of question, because we are scoring now from 1 to 5, so that type of question gives leeway to the person who's on the panel to score you semi-subjectively, right? So now, if you don't set a good tone in the beginning, they might end up penalizing you when they listen to the rest of your responses, especially if you don't salvage yourself during the other questions. That question, I always tell people, and it's not only junior colleagues who do this, by the way, even senior colleagues, because we were interviewing senior colleagues today. Last week, it was not a medical post, but it was relatively senior people. I mean, in terms of years in the work environment. People still believe that question is a rehash of your CV, which is not. That question wants to understand how your previous work experience has benefited you or developed you to be fit for the role you're applying for. So what is expected there is for you to touch on key work experiences or any other thing within your life that you think is relevant and would have equipped you for the role you're applying for. Now, what people do is they just rehash their CV and without context. We have the CV, we shortlisted your CV, we've seen your CV, we have it in front of us. So you don't need to tell us where you've worked and how many years and what title you held. We need just a sort of a comprehensive but brief and concise overview of the key or the highlights in your work experience, skills that you've acquired and the experience that you've acquired that makes you suitable for the role you're applying for. People still don't get that. And how you narrate that story also is important. Hence, I'm saying it sets the tone because it determines your likability to the panel. So it's important. You are nervous, but it's important how you put that response across, and to show that you are alive to what is happening, to show that you understand that the interview is meant to understand you in the context of whether you are suitable for the role you're applying for or not. Now people start doing funny things, and some go on and on and on, and the issue with that is that, once you go on and on and on and on and on, what it tells the next person is that you're not reading the room, because normally the panel, you'll see from their facial expressions whether you're on the right track or not. Sometimes it's difficult, but sometimes you can see, right? There are people who don't want to be cut off. So we try not to cut you off, right? But at the same time, when we allow people to go on a tangent and it's not really helping them or us to understand them better in the context of the purpose of this interview, if we don't cut them off, then it wastes time. But when you cut them off, some people get thrown off and they get more anxious, and it's not what we want to do to a candidate. You want a candidate as relaxed as possible, to understand that it's not an exam. We're not trying to trick you, but we're trying to get to know you. So people do these things. The one other thing that two other things that maybe let me briefly touch on. But one I'm just going to touch on: being prepared. It shows when you're not prepared. Your answers, you might know the answer and the content and context, but your response is all over the place, and it's illogical, doesn't make sense. It makes it difficult to follow your thought process and your reasoning. So you do that one question, two questions maybe, it's okay. But if you do that for all the questions, then it shows that you didn't prepare for the interview. You know the answers, but how you put them across. And it's important to know that the expectation is different for every level of a job, depending on how senior or how, in terms of supervisory role or managerial or even clinical. There are different expectations in how you respond and approach to certain questions. Second thing is some people think an interview is a Viva or an OSCE. It's just we ask a question, you give an answer, like that. And that's not what that is. So they lack the human component. They lack soft skills. They lack, one person felt like a robot. They were so matter-of-factorial that we couldn't have a conversation. It was just ask, answer, ask, answer. And even though the person made the cutoff in terms of minimum percentage, but they were in the bottom of the total number of the candidates in terms of performance, because they lacked that emotional mastery to be present as a human in the interview. And when you respond, go into detail, man. Elaborate what you're trying to say. Have a conversation. Have a conversation. So as we job hunt, let's pay attention to those things. Practice, practice, practice. And if you're job hunting, take every interview you're invited to. Go. Don't be discouraged. Use it as a learning curve. The more interviews you go to, the more you become comfortable. But don't become too comfortable. Overselling yourself is a danger. It's always a danger. There are those things that people don't seem to understand. Or being overconfident, bordering on arrogance, and these are the people that refuse to be cut off when they are redirected. Overselling yourself, being over talkative, where you just blabber on and on. I know some people, when they're anxious, they do that, but this is something you need to practice to try and get under control. It doesn't bode well for you when you're in an interview, especially if the panel is showing you facially that, hey, you know, but you continue. Otherwise, talk to you soon.